Hey guys, today we're going to do a quick review on installing the Node.js system on your computer. We're also going to talk real quick about NPM, the Node Package Manager. We're going to talk about the Vue-CLI, that's the command line interface that allows us to bring up a pre-packaged development environment for the Vue.js framework. And it's pretty much a prerequisite. I'll put it in front of any of my new tutorials so that anybody coming in to watch one of my Vue.js tutorials, we don't have to go through the installation up through the Vue.js CLI to start a project. Anytime I do a new project from here on out, we'll just start it at the end, per se, of this tutorial. And that way I can just tag the tutorial as a required if you don't understand the point that we are when we start a project using Vue.js. So, without further ado, let's get started. The first thing that you're going to need to have installed on your computer, whether it's a Mac, a Linux, or a Windows machine, is Node.js. And you can get Node.js by simply searching for Node.js. There's the URL if you, in fact, want to just type that on in. And from there, you'll come to this home page. We'll go to the downloads, and you'll simply follow whichever version you may need for your operating system. In this case, I'm using Windows 10. So I would use the Windows installer and simply download and install it. Now, I already have mine installed, but it really is as simple as downloading it, installing it, and following the instructions as you install it. You can download the LTS, which is the long-term software. It is basically what a number of these continually updating companies do is they create a long-term solutions platform. In other words, they test it, it's stable after a number of iterations forward, and then they create what's called the long-term software or long-term solution. And that's the version of that at 6.11.2 is more than what the Vue system needs to operate properly. You can get the current version, and you'll see that the current version is 8.2.1. Now, I found some problems with current version running through the CLI, so I backed up to 8.0.0, and you can go up and down. But for most people who don't need the cutting edge of Node.js, aren't building servers with it, and just need the NPM function and the developer platform functions that come with it, LTS is fine. So you would download the LTS for whatever operating system you've got, and you can run and follow the instructions on how to install Node. Once you have Node installed, you can now run things like package managers, and you can do all the command line interface things that you may have seen other people use to install pieces and parts of their software. Certainly if you're looking at JavaScript. The Node Package Manager and Node.js are basically required. I can't imagine trying to accomplish almost any task without using those functions, short of simply CDN and creating one page at a time, which is certainly possible, and lots of people do it, but I would certainly recommend going in this direction. So we've got the, at this point we would have Node installed, and then we need the NPM installed. Now once you get Node, Node will create a path, and it may ask you in the install if you want to create that, but it should default to setting up a path in your operating system if it's necessary. I don't know that Mac even needs it. But in Windows, we have paths that allow us to run command lines, and they need to be inserted so that when Windows starts up, it knows that that path exists. If I'm confusing you at any time, we'll go ahead and move to the next step. If it doesn't work, then we'll discuss that. Okay, so we're going to move on to the Node Package Manager. Now, everything else that we need to do from here on out is going to use the terminal. I have WebStorm, which has the terminal built into it. But for most people, if they don't have WebStorm, or they want something that is free as an IDE, they can use Atom and Sublime and, I don't know, brackets. Visual Studio Code is free from Microsoft. I understand it's open source. There are a number, even if you're just using Notepad++. There are a number of scripting helpers and or integrated development environments, IDEs, that you can use. A number of them are free. I personally think that WebStorm and PHP Storm and the IntelliJ products, IntelliJ being their parent company, are far superior to anything else out there. But that's my personal opinion. People get used to software, and I know Atom is a big contender. Atom is made by GitHub. So you know that it's going to be, there's going to be a number of teams working on Atom to make it better, and it's got a really good community. I personally think that WebStorm is better, but again, that's preference. WebStorm it costs money, so you can buy it as an annual license subscription. If you do PHP, I would highly recommend the PHP version of that. That's called PHP Storm, and it costs a little bit more than WebStorm, but PHP Storm basically is WebStorm with PHP functionality. So you don't need to buy both. You're just buying a more advanced version. The big IntelliJ project is their Java IDE. And of course, if you've looked at anything that has Android in it, Android and Google use the IntelliJ Java IDE. So they stopped with their open platform, and now they're using a paid or licensed version company from IntelliJ. So it does tell you a little bit about their confidence in that company. And I think you also have some, like a 30-day or something trial period that you can test it out to see if you like it. So it's not something you have to actually, put down your cash for and then find out shortly thereafter that you didn't like it and not get your cash back. Okay, well, with that aside, let's go ahead and do it the other way. So I'm not going to use WebStorm to start my project. I'm going to use the Windows terminal. And since I'm using Windows, and Windows is typically one of the more tough operating systems to deal with a terminal, I'm going to show you a couple of tricks here. There are obviously a couple of ways to open the terminal or the command line. You can go to the search area and obviously hit command. Whoops. So you can get your command prompt by doing that, and you can see it right here. You can hit your Windows key on your Windows keyboard and hit R, and that'll bring up the run command. And if you type CMD there, that will bring up your command dialog box. And let me show you something here real quick. If we just do CMD and we open that, that command brings up the terminal, and it brings it up with a default location. So its folder location is users rsim, which is Windows default location. To move around is basically using the CD commands for change directory. So my particular file folders that I use are on the F drive, and they're in a number of projects. So if I need to change the drive, I name the drive with a colon after it, and that will change my drive. If I need to move up and down, I use CD. So I can use change directory /. So it doesn't matter which way you put your slash in this particular case. CD / will get you home. CD / projects. So doesn't look like you have to remember which way the slash goes, backwards or forwards, which used to get confusing in DOS. Anyway, so we've got that, and that's how you move around in the terminal to get to your projects. And it's one of the reasons I really don't prefer the terminal. So I'm going to show you one other trick that's really nice in using the Windows system with the platform, and that is you can hit the Windows button in E, and that brings up your Windows Explorer. We can go to F. We can go to Projects. And if I want to build something in Projects, I'll go back. So here's my projects. I can hit Shift, the right mouse key, and I have the Open Command Line window here. And that automatically brings up the command line in the Projects window that you have on your Explorer. So you don't have to worry about going backwards and forwards and changing drive letters and all that. You can start right there. Okay, so from there, we want to make sure that Node is installed. Now, Node would have a path on our primary machine, which means that any folder that we use, Node should exist. If it doesn't, then we'll need to add it to the path or re-download it or reinstall it. We want to make sure that that is, in fact, has been installed. So what we'll do is we'll do Node-V for version, and it'll bring up the version. And like I said, I'm using 8.0.0 because I found a little incompatibility with 8.2.1, I think, and 8.1. Anyway, I backed up a little bit because I was getting some errors. And more importantly, the 6.11, unless you're going to be building in Node and you need the latest and greatest functions of Node.js for servers and those type of well, specifically, if you're using a package that requires something greater than the LTS, then you may need something greater than the LTS. But if you don't get it. Okay, so that both lets us know that Node's installed, that it can read it, and it gives us our version. So the next thing we're going to want to do is install NPM. Now, if we already have NPM installed, we can do the same thing we did with Node, which is npm-v. And that will give us our version of the Node package manager. Now, if we don't have that installed, right here, we can NPM pricing documentation. There we go. Okay, so just getting started, you will find what here's how you install right here. So it's basically in their documentation, it's at the bottom of every single one of their pages, how to install. So if you require a super user, sudo, in a Linux or a Macintosh, you'll use the sudo in front of that. For us Windows users, we don't need sudo. We are either logged in as a super user, administrator, or we're not. So we may need admin privileges to do certain things on a computer. And if you have problems with that, then you'll have to log in as an administrator or the primary user. And that's way beyond this tutorial. So I hope you don't have those problems. It would be very rare, but it does happen. Okay, let's go ahead and use the npm install npm at latest -g for global. All right, so we can bring up our terminal real quick. I'm going to go ahead and just split these. And we've got npm install npm at latest /g. Now the G stands for global, which means that once it's installed, you don't have to be in this particular folder, project, to use it. You can use it anywhere in any project from here on out throughout your operating system. So that's obviously the way we want to go with something that we use continuously on a day-to-day basis and is not project specific, which NPM is not. It's the command line system that you will use in all projects to start all different ones. Okay, so we hit enter, and that will bring in our latest. I already have the latest, but I figured, it doesn't hurt to just reinstall it over again. So we can go npm-v, and we still have 5.3.0. So now we've got Node installed. We've got the npm installed, and now what we need to do is install our Vue-CLI. So let's see if I have a real quick one here so we can see it. If we're under Vue.js, right, we go get started, and actually we don't want the get started because they always start us off with the introduction. Right? We actually want the installation. And we want, not CDN, we want the NPM, but we want the CLI right here. So we can just now follow these instructions right to the T all the way up to running the developer. So we can do npm install. Now you can do this is the long version of global. right? The other one was the -G. So we'll just do this version real quick. But remember that double dash global is the exact same thing as -G. So you don't have to type it all the way out. So we've got npm install global Vue-CLI. And this will get us our command line interface. Again, I already have all this stuff installed for the most part. Well, not for the most part. I already have all this stuff installed. So it doesn't hurt to do it again. And it will update to the latest version if, in fact, you just reinstall it. Which is one of the reasons I didn't want to reinstall Node.js, because I had to go back and look up each version so I could back up versions from the latest, because of that incompatibility I had at 8.2.1. And it may be gone now. There's no telling. Okay, so we've installed our Vue-CLI, and we now have the ability to start Vue projects in the terminal and scaffold them completely out. So if I'm sitting in my projects folder, which I started here, I'm going to go ahead and do a Windows E to bring up my Windows Explorer, go to my F, go to my projects, and I've got just an empty thing project there where I created using WebStorm, and I'm just going to delete it. So we're going to delete that real quick. So we've got an empty folder called projects, and we're going to close that down, and we're sitting in that projects parent directory with nothing inside of projects. As you can see, if I do an ls for the directory, there's nothing in it. Okay, so from here we can simply start our project. So we're still using the Windows terminal, where we've got our instructions on the right hand side that we're just following right down in the line. We've installed the CLI, we've got npm, we've got Node. So now, if you're ever starting a new project, you won't need Node again. You'll never need to mess with that until maybe you update it sometime in the far off future. You won't need npm to be updated for a long time, and whatever reason that may be, because of a package, it will let you know. The CLI updates, it used to update every month, about once a month, and now it updates about once every 3 months, if even that often. So you don't need to update the CLI very often. So, and if you don't update the CLI, you're just using a slightly older version. So unless you're looking for some cutting edge ability that's been implemented, you wouldn't know the difference anyway. Okay, so from here, let's build a web project in Vue. So we're going to do Vue init webpack. I wanted to show a couple of different. Let's go ahead and start a simple one. We'll do their simple version in their template, and you can look in their templates. We'll go under the official CLI. There we go. There are our templates. Okay, so from here, you can see that we've got a number of templates. We've got the Webpack template, the Webpack Simple, the Browserify Simple, PWA, and just Simple. So let's just do a real quick one. This is the simplest version. We're going to do a simple version. Vue init simple Vue simple project. So what we've got is we've got Vue init, which we have to have. We've got the template package, which is how it's going to install it, and then the package name, which is Vue simple. All right, so if we run that, name, Vue simple, author, and that's it. It just installed it. So there is no npm, there's no server developer runner, there's no nothing. So if you wanted to view the simple project, you're going to have to just Control E and come up to your project, Vue simple, and you can just start it. Maybe you're bringing it up in just Google Chrome. There you go. So that's your Vue simple, and you could work on that using a simple tool editor like Notebook++ or any IDE. You can obviously view it, Dreamweaver, anything. You could view the internals of it and work from there. So let's go back to our projects. We're going to go ahead and shut this down, and let's go ahead and install a I guess I brought down the wrong one. There we go. Didn't it? Okay. So we'll bring up Vue.js, get started. Bring that back from get started to installation. All right. So we've got our projects. We've got our Vue simple. We can cd / to get back to home. We can change directory to projects. And we're back in our parent directory. Now, this, like I said, I'm using the Windows terminal the whole time on this because some people don't use WebStorm, and I think Atom actually has a terminal built in as well, or it has a plugin to have the terminal built in as well. So that's just FYI. I like dealing with the terminal that's built in because it keeps me associated with that single project. So let's go ahead and bring in the one I would normally start. I could go through all of these and it would just be time consuming. The easier thing is for you to build a project under each one and see what's inside. So we can do Vue init webpack, and we'll name it Vue webpack. All right. So that's gonna initiate a webpack project. It's going to no linting, no this, no that. Okay. So if you don't know what that is, when we bring in the project, it's going to ask us what the name of it is, which I left as what I named it. You can give it a description. It'll ask for the author, Vue build, install Vue router. I always install the Vue router just for future build purposes as it gets larger. ESLinting, I actually do ESLinting unless I'm doing a tutorial, but ESLinting is just a syntax checker to make sure that you're following standards. It doesn't really check for errors, it follows standards. So if you put a semicolon where they don't like it, and that would be the team who develops the standards, it will stop your build process. It makes you a better programmer, but it would be really bad if you were trying to get something done really fast and you didn't have the time to deal with whether you put a semicolon at the end to terminate something or not. And it had, obviously, ESLint does a number of other things besides semicolons. It's spacing, it's structure, it's line characters, you name it. Set up a test. We're not doing tests. We're not doing end-to-end tests. So that's our Webpack setup. And what we've got is a complete operating development environment with Webpack with Vue scaffolded out. So when we've generated that, now what we need to do is we need to get into that folder because it generated a folder for us in the project name, which would be cd Vue webpack. And if you notice, it gives us the instructions right here on how to finish up all the way to the point of running. So since we're going to cd into that folder, and we're in that folder, I'm going to basically CLS will clear the screen, but it'll also clear my instructions. Not that I care, but remember that if you're doing that at this point, you may not want to CLS. I need the room and get off the bottom toggle bar. So at this point in time, we're going to Npm Install, and that will install all the Node package managers. So the first thing we did is installed the runtime environment, but we need all the JavaScript files that actually make that environment work, and those are called the Node modules. And so that's what we just installed. Once we have a package.json file, which it installed previously, it uses that file with the npm install to fill it all out. Now, I'm just giving you information to get up and running to the point that we're going to need. You can just let this work, because the real importance of this is it's a tool to allow you to program. If you're really interested in how the tools work, there's lots of documentation on it, and it is fun stuff. I enjoy it. But remember that it's the tool that allows you to program. So if you want to dive into these tools and get into them and understand them, then you're more than welcome to, because they're built in the same tools that you program in, JavaScript. But I don't want to get on a side note and say, hey, we need to know how this works, we need to know how this works, because the ultimate goal is to build our own whatever. I mean, whether it's applications or PWAs or, web pages, whatever Whatever we're looking to build has nothing to do with how we're building it. We just need to know how to get from A to C, and we don't care about B. But if you do, you can go look at it, you can look into it, and it all exists. We're dealing with Webpack, we're dealing with the Vue-CLI. I just want to get you to the point that you can build applications and projects. And to remember that none of this is material, what I'm talking about of how this works and all that information, on getting your job done as a developer. This is just the tools to accomplish that goal. The more you know about how it works, the easier it is to fix things when they go wrong. So I would highly recommend that you learned how it worked in a superficial manner so it doesn't give you days of headache trying to figure out a problem. But you don't need to know the detailed aspect of how every piece and part of the development environment is put together. Most importantly, because it's constantly changing. From month to month to month, things change drastically. And that's one of the reasons that we use an NPM manager, because we need to know the versions of all the different items that are being used within the system so that they don't switch out and change underneath us and break stuff. Because when I first started doing tutorials under NPM, the most frustrating thing is I would start the tutorial. I learned how package.json kind of worked in keeping all the tools that they needed, and I would start a project, and then the first thing I would do is I'd go to the package.json file that they indicated to start with, and I would update all the stuff inside it. So I was starting with the best, greatest, and latest. Well, their tutorial would inevitably not work because all the pieces and parts didn't work together the way they did in the tutorial. There had been new features added, there had been deprecated functions, there had been deprecated packages, you name it. And just getting that working was daunting, and it was discouraging. And one of the things that I didn't like about it was I thought personally that everything should still work. I didn't understand that there are 1,000 packages up underneath the 10 packages that you got that these guys are using that all work independently, made by independent companies that while they do their best not to break things, they have to with new features. And I got mad at the guy making the tutorial instead of realizing that the package.json file is there to lock everything into a system of development. You may not be running a tutorial that has the latest features, but it's easier to run through that tutorial, learn the basics, and then deal with the latest features in a future tutorial or a piece or part. So sorry for that side note, but that's kind of the whole thing with the package JSON files and the node systems and the NPM, is at first they're really kind of abstract if you haven't used them before. So anyway, the point being is that everything that we're doing now is just part of the platform that we use to build. We're not programming at this point, as far as anybody else is concerned and as far as I'm concerned. We haven't developed anything. We just basically created our IDE, as it were. So we've created our project in Webpack, and we've NPM'd our project. We've done Npm Install, so now we have the nodes in there. And now we can just run it by using npm run dev for development, and that will bring up our dev server. And there we go. We have the dev server on the right-hand side. We've got it listening on the left-hand side in the terminal. Now that's all done with the terminal, and that's how people will do it, using the terminal at any given point if they don't have a built-in terminal to their IDE. So if in your terminal you can shut it down by doing Control-C and answering yes to terminate the batch job. And that actually shuts down the server. Of course, the page is still sitting here, but if you look into the inspection, you'll see the connection is gone. Okay, so that's all done with the command line interface. Now, if I bring up my WebStorm, I need a new project. So when I bring that in, it's going to bring me into whatever my last one is. In this particular case, it was F projects. I had created that one folder and then obviously erased it by hand. So let's do Vue WebStorm project, and we'll create, and that gives me WebStorm. Now, if I'm going to do the exact same thing in WebStorm, obviously I still have to have Node.js installed and the NPM, but here's the terminal. So now I can just do Vue init webpack, and instead of putting the package name, because I've already created it here when I created the project, I just leave that blank. And it does the exact same thing we did in the other system, except in this particular case it says generate project in current directory instead of generate project in whatever directory I may have inserted after webpack. Project name, project description, the author, the runtime and compiler. Do I want the router? I always want the router. I'm not doing ESLint. I'm not doing testing. I'm not doing end-to-end testing. Like I said, I run in ESLint all the time, but I don't do it in tutorials because it's a compiler blocking, and it just I go searching for a semicolon I may have put in during a tutorial, and that's a waste of your time. And then npm install will install the whole thing on my WebStorm, and when we run the original init Vue, it builds our package for us. And of course, right now we're installing these Node modules. But in WebStorm, I can run on my package.json file, which tells us everything that it's installing. Also tells us what our scripts are, and I can right-click and hit Show Npm Scripts. So now I see that I've got a dev, start, and build script that are part of the Vue-CLI development platform. And instead of running it in the terminal, I don't have to run npm run dev. I can, but I don't have to. I can run it right here from the GUI interface, which will bring this up probably in another window. Hold on. There it is. It's in another window. Let me bring it over. And now we have that running in our dev. So, and instead of running the terminal with Control-C and stopping it there, I can stop it right there, and I can rerun it from right there. So that's a lot faster than typing. It's switching windows and then typing. Now, there are tricks where you can make your keyboard much faster than ever picking up your mouse. But those are different tutorials altogether, how to use your mouse, how to not use your mouse to be efficient. Anyway, so everything's running, and there's your inspector. If you don't have the Vue Dev Tools, this right here installed, do install that. It's a plugin for Chrome and now Firefox too. Firefox also has that plugin. So whichever of the two developer browsers that you use, Firefox or Chrome, they both have the Vue plugin, the DevTools plugin, and if you're building Vue applications, it's a no-brainer. You'll want the Vue DevTools plugin. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Everything that I build from here on out in tutorial versions will start at this position, which is basically, and I always use the Webpack. I don't use Webpack Simple. I don't use Simple. I don't use Browserify. I don't use Browserify Simple. I use the Vue init Webpack. So that's because I'm always going to bring in the router. I'm going to assume that you're going to want ESLinting or end-to-end testing or testing of some kind, maybe in the future. Now, we'll get to those tutorials much later, but at this point in time, maybe in the future, you'll want those functionalities. So we're just going to assume that every one of them is going to include that functionality. So no matter which project I start, now in WebStorm, I can double-click that and go to what's called distraction-free zone to give us a little room. I'm using very small resolution here to help on smaller devices during the tutorials. But so this is where you'll start. Unless we have a major change in the Vue init system, These will be the files that you see once that's started. If you want to reinitialize this project, it's simple. You just literally delete the whole thing. So, you know, if you've gotten off track so far and you're not using a revision system or a versioning system, sorry, then you know, you can delete the whole package. It doesn't leave anything behind in secret folders or anything. You can delete that whole package and rebuild it. Now, when I say it doesn't leave anything behind in secret folders, the WebStorm has a .idea folder. Anyway, it's got a hidden folder in our WebStorm project folder, and we'll see that right here. We can look at WebStorm project. So right there, you've got the .idea folder, and so that's hidden from us in the main project because it's keeping your settings of your application so that when you leave and come back to it, that it doesn't have to it doesn't start in some default manner that would be really annoying. So if I shut that down and I've got all this spaced out and have my favorite pieces and parts open, and maybe, something like even my deployment window, remote host sitting over here, in a much bigger window because then I couldn't type. But if I had to open that up and bring up all those settings, it would be annoying. And every different project really determines how you may have that all set up. So it's not like it's a default setting. It would be a per project setting. Anyway, that's why that hidden folder is there. But as far as the NPM and the Node package system and Vue is concerned, if you want to just delete all that and start from scratch, you're more than welcome to. Again, you would have the empty folder, so you'd just do the Vue init webpack without the name, and it would just rebuild it, and you could do it right from scratch again. Okay, I think that covers it. Again, this is where we'll start virtually every project. We'll do that until they change something so that it looks different, and once that happens, I'll recreate this tutorial showing that. So have a good one. We'll get started with our next tutorial, and now you have your starting spot. I will put this particular video as a reference in all my new projects so we don't have to go through that or any of that, even in a much simpler form from here on out. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Keep programming.